All right, looks like it's blowing up now a bit. Looks like most people are coming in now. So I'll get started so we don't delay those who've on time. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming for this month's or this round's version of our webinar interview with an expert. So we've got Jay here from Programmed NZ, one of our clients who has a lot of experience in the drone industry. He's doing a lot of really great work. We've known Jay for a couple of years now, and he's always had nuggets of wisdom and insights into a lot of really great areas. So a couple other points we've heard in the past from previous who attended webinars or got involved with our content, the idea of facility management and sort of the future of that and what's happening in that space and how are people operating and what they should be aware of is a couple of times I've heard it come up. So we decided we'd ask Jay, who's been very gracious with his time, to do a bit of an interview and about his journey through Programmed, what he's seen in this space, what's sort of happening at the moment, and what does he sort of see some future trends and where things are heading here. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just jump across. And I'll hand it over to Jay. Jay, do you want to maybe give us a little bit of background to yourself?
Key order, everyone. As Alex said, I work for Programmed in the facilities management business at the moment, but also across group for New Zealand. Look, you're just going to go through the question points and hopefully add a lot of value to your journeys within this space. But I'm going to answer some of these questions and provide some insight. So if I look at where my career started and why I'm now involved with the drones, I've been involved in drones probably since I was a young teenager. The old man got the first Mavic Pro, the first one, and had a little bit of play in that. I was a landscaper before I moved to health and safety. And with Program, I started about 4 years ago within the FM business specifically, before we had a little bit of, and then I started looking at it at group. Initially, we were looking at how we can fly from a safety perspective, and we'll go into a little bit more shortly.
Fantastic. Awesome, mate. Jump across. Great. So first thing out of the gate, I think it's always really interesting to unpack the journey with people's drone programs, how they got involved with it. I know that's probably the most questions we get, trying to hear about what people are doing in this space and how they started. So I guess for yourself and Programmed, what's been the journey so far? How did it all start and what's it sort of look like across the years?
The one key takeaway is this is not necessarily a fast journey. It can be as slow as you want it to be, or as fast as you want it to be. Program, our position is to make sure that we get it right from the start. So we started this journey 3 years ago. As I said, it was from a safety perspective. One of our workers came to us. We're trying to fly a large site that had a lot of vegetation on it to move some earth for a deconstruction of a facility. We weren't able to clearly identify what needed to happen for the contractors. So we're asked to use the drone as a way to aerially survey this at an affordable manner and identify with both the client and the contractors about how we're going to contour the land after the deconstruct of the facility occurred. From there, so I flew that one originally. From there, I was asked by the GM at the time, now CEO for our property services business, to look into this from a commercial point of view. So I sat away on a weekend, looked it all up, and came back to him on the Monday and said, "Hey, look, there's a real commercial opportunity for the business in this space." And I would encourage everyone to go look at it further if you're interested about either picking up for FM or yourself within your business. There's a lot of applications, and we'll discuss some of the future direction that we're looking at within Program later. We push this from a safety perspective first and foremost, so how we can do a roof inspection or an aerial survey, removing our workers from working at heights completely where possible. As a result of this, like anything that's generally about safety or efficiencies, there's a lot more efficiencies to be gained if we're doing things safe. So we're not having to hire the equipment to site anymore. We can just show up with a qualified pilot, fly the site, analyze the imagery, look at it with a contractor without everyone having to visit site. So there's a lot more benefit to all involved. If I look at what it looks like today, we've got 4 pilots in Australia currently. we've got 7 pilots in New Zealand with an expansion plan for another 3. So they're in the pipeline now within our property services business. Our use cases, right now we do a lot of 3D mapping, and we'll look at some stats later on in this presentation, and you'll see the numbers are quite significant. We're heavily involved in 3D mapping and capturing our buildings. We either do that through a 2D flight, or we do it for a full 3D flight with the Skydio unit. So in equipment, we use Skydio and DJI equipment currently. We do a lot of estimation, so there's a bit of proof of concept and some R&D work we're doing in that space right now. Roof inspections regularly, but then also 3D models, and thermal is another one that we're exploring currently. If I talk about 3D models, it's more about how we annotate, we provide the measurements, but also objectively sitting with the client. So when you're trying to present traditionally in facilities management, you might be looking, and we'll just look at a roof, for example, you might be looking at a leak on a roof. A roofer goes up and takes a photo of the leak and comes back down and shows you, hey, this is your problem, this is what needs to be fixed. But you've got no idea objectively where that's located on the roof space. You just know it's somewhere. So if you try and identify it later or send somebody up to go fix the exact same problem, they're probably going to struggle to identify it immediately unless it's really obvious. So there's a lot of benefits in there. If we look at our zero harm initiative, again, back to our safety, it's about making sure our people are not within essentially a position that they can fall through a roof or harm themselves. So this just aligns really well within our use cases here.
Awesome, mate. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Let me jump to this. Oh, sorry, jump back. Fantastic. Awesome. So over those years, you're saying this initial use case of sort of starting out with drones to see if we can plug a few gaps, and now it's sort of grown to 10 and more drones across Australia and New Zealand. How have you seen, probably in general too, it sort of mature over the years? Sort of, you mentioned a few sort of, I guess, asset inspections or fault detections. How's it sort of grown over the years now?
Yeah, so initially we didn't actually know how we're going to apply this fully apart from doing a roof inspection. We quickly identified that it could do a 3D. We tried this with a DJI initially to build 3D models, and it was not successful, to say the least. There were big black holes in our reconstructs. So we quickly identified, hey, on the merits of safety and efficiency, what else can we find out there in the market to help build these 3D models in high detail rather than having to fly manually a DJI and guess it. That's how we landed on the Skydio units. Naturally, this is all merged from military. I mean, I don't know how many people sitting on this call today imagine we'll be discussing about drones being used in everyday workflows. I certainly didn't picture it. I know when I was playing with it as a kid, this was cool, but there's no application in it apart from photography. That's personally what I used to do as a hobby as a photographer. And now we're pulling it into this business. Within our challenges, probably changed. It's keeping up with the technology. I don't know how many people are flying on this call. I imagine there's plenty using a DJI gear, but they're constantly changing their equipment for us, which is challenging to make it align with what our requirements are, or when we want to scale up, because we want uniformity across the business, which helps reduce some of the areas that we can see in terms of maintenance and training hours. Unfortunately, because that keeps changing, we have to keep realigning or keep adapting. And then in Australia, you've got your REOC, you need to adjust for what you can fly. In New Zealand, the same thing. We've got to adjust what our Exposition looks like with CAA here.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. So on that one there, of those things that have changed over the years and what they're emerging to now, what's been sort of the biggest lesson learned you've seen, maybe from yourself, and even if there's of the wider industry now? I guess what has been the potholes or the gaps that that have changed for the better over the last couple of years? What sort of were they, and how have you seen people overcome them?
Yeah, I think it's important for everyone here to remember that change and adoption of this technology is slower than what we appreciate. All of us are probably on this call because we believe in this tech, or we've seen it in real life and news, but the adoption within the business is not going to be as quick as you want it to be, unless you have a key supporter. So if you've got a director that's supporting this and sees the vision and understands it, the uptake will probably be far quicker than if you're just somebody over to the side of the business, say a project manager, pushing it for your project. Absolutely, it'll be seen and it'll be picked up eventually, but it's not going to be a business-wide adoption. So that's one of the biggest lessons we've probably had. but it's also we've been deliberate in managing that uptake as well. So we didn't want it to go from a crawl to a run, which is once we've got a sign off and a tick, everyone wants to fly. It's about managing that appropriately. So we've overcome that through our executive and senior management sponsorship. We've developed our policies and procedures very clearly. We've got alignment with our directors on what this looks like within the business, and then the general managers or the heads off within programmed understand what's required. We have a drone community of practice within the business. So that's where the different businesses of program come together and learn from what's been happening within the other areas of our operations, but also so we can provide updates of what the requirements are. I just want to stress FlyFreely helps us with our governance and our management of our compliance. And that's partly why we're having a chat today. But that's one of the way that we've managed to overcome some of the restrictions. So if I can give some advice to everyone here, it'd be about making sure you demonstrate the value first in what you can do. A lot of people are hesitant to adopt this. So sometimes you're going to have to go and do that extra bit of work to provide the freebies or provide the value add on top of what was necessarily requested for you. And that's where we see a lot of uptake. We see it as a value add tool rather than a premium tool to add on for our customers.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for that. I was going to say that was getting the executive buy-in and cross-department collaboration always feels like a definitely one of the major steps and probably the biggest step to unlock the business using drones effectively. Did you have any advice on, I guess, standard business cases make sense, but getting that executive buy-in, that feels to be a bit of a blocker we see a lot of people come up against. They've bought some drones, they're using it, but they can't really get it to sweep across the organization. So yeah, any advice on people who sort of want to try to get their executive buy-in?
Look, it's important to identify those key supporters within the business, the ones that are really going to advocate for you or advocate the system with you. The executive can, one, be a bit hard to get across. So you need to look at the operations teams, the ones that are going to support it. The operations teams are essentially who the exec listen to at the end of the day. If you can deliver improved safety, additional efficiencies, additional value, then it's a no-brainer from a commercial point of view. And once the operations team that, they're going to want it all the time. We see that now. We've regularly asked or approached within New Zealand team and the Aussie team. We're having even conversations this morning about who can assist with demonstrating these things to the business or to the clients. As we achieve little ticks or little support bubbles around the business, it just becomes uniform and set in the way we do things.
Fantastic. Awesome. And I love that you guys, the cross collaboration between the Australian and New Zealand team, I find that's I'm seeing some organizations sort of do that a little bit better, the ones that are spread out, but that sort of cross collaboration between sharing ideas and what has worked and hasn't worked seems to be super effective. So that's awesome. Cool. So I guess where do you see the future of drones and facility maintenance heading? It's sort of hard. I know 3 years, probably no one knows what they're doing in 3 years, but at least in the next horizon from here, like sort of use cases, technology, AI. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, three years ahead is not going to be what any of us think it's going to be today. I think back to the last 3 years when we started, and anyone that flies currently, the tech you're using 3 years to today is significantly different and more advanced. You're already probably seeing a lot of the wash drones. I know in Australia it was very heavily promoted online in the media. I can't remember which news channel that was. So that one's a big one that you're going to see within the FM space. Again, it's about how we can be efficient but improve safety. If you don't need to put a scaffold on EWP, you can reduce the number of workers on site. The efficiencies exist immediately. The ROIs, we've done our ROIs, they do stack up within that space. So I think you'll find an explosion of wash drones, although they are fairly early to the market and rudimentary. They're either a adaptation of an existing drone like an M30 or something that's specifically made for a singular purpose. So I think you'll find that as we mature in this space, the drones are going to be more versatile in that they're multi-purposed. I think right now everyone's identifying the single uses and running down a pathway with that without necessarily taking that step back for that multi-purpose. So that's where you'll start seeing these things as a real tool within the business rather than just a specific unique application compared to what it could be. Smart building integrations. So in the next 3 years, you'll absolutely see drone in a box occur and integrate into the building systems. So whether we're doing an on-site check, either manually by flying it from a remote location, or if it's just on timer or set to an IoT device. So IoT is going to be big moving ahead in this space, is the way I see it, and certainly some of the R&D that we're working on in the background here. AI integration, as you noted before, Alex, that exists today. It's getting smarter and smarter. If you look at Skydio, they already use the AI clouds to identify flight paths, but DJI and the other providers are also coming along in spades in that area. Additionally, the generation models in the background. So if you've got a essentially a platform like Drone Deploy, the AI in that space is coming along. So you'll see it in every single thing that we do in terms of autonomous or operations, whether we're reviewing a model or whether we're flying manually, the AI is going to exist to make our lives easier.
Fantastic, mate. That's great. That's super handy. Awesome. All right, the shameless plug for us. The I guess your experience with FlyFreely as well. So I guess how has FlyFreely sort of fit into that process there? Probably more of what sort of triggered it to bring it in, and as well as how are you guys using it today?
Yeah, look, we're looking for a way to manage and consolidate our information. So I'll share some stats with you about Skydio shortly. But we don't have visibility on our DJI stats. FlyFreely assists the business with that. We can pull the information on our maintenance, on our training hours and flight hours for all the pilots, rather than just a specific form in a DJI specific cloud or a Skydio specific cloud. Again, the two models that we use are those from those providers. We need it for governments as well. So in Oz, it's written into the REOC. Because we trust it that much, but it also provides comfort to the chief pilots that things are being managed in terms of no-fly zones or where there's alerts and notifications that need to be managed by the pilots. In New Zealand, it's key for us. We only have full-time pilots in New Zealand. Australia, it's a little bit more as required. So the pilots over here, we've used it in some situations, but we will be using it heavily very shortly as we expand into our property services business, where we're having more of those people that aren't specifically trained up, the people flying under a 102, a 101, which is the lower level in New Zealand, or just an REPL in Australia, where we can now manage their, say, non-full-time role, but manage the safety of their flights and having visibility. So we're going to be getting painters and BDs to fly for us regularly within the property services space, and that's where we've got the R&D on our estimation occurring. So they're going to pick that up significantly, and once we roll that into Australia, it'll explode massively, and there's no way a single chief pilot in either country can manage that appropriately and meet the regulators' requirements without a tool in place. So that's where FlyFreely comes in handy for us.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks, mate. And on a side question there, just sort of sparked up of, we sort of see that you've got those pilots, those full-time pilots, those who are very much across it at the top. And something that we coin at FlyFreely is part-time pilots. You mentioned there before about painters and sort of areas where drones is sort of a secondary tool to them on the side. And sometimes we want to enable those people to be able to use drones quickly and get the job done and come back and not bottleneck our full-time pilots. But I guess managing those part-time pilots and those secondary pilots, do you have any, I guess, advice for others out there? Is there a special way to sort of manage them, or do we sort of keep them managed the exact same way we do our normal pilots? Or how do you sort of take on that challenge?
You look in terms of the flight requirements, they're managed in the exact same way as the rest of the pilots. In terms of their flight hours, they might be reduced, so we'll have an allowance, but they're only allowed for New Zealand. We're only flying in a specific flight type for the part-time pilots. They can fly in an automated flight in 2D mapping only. If our full-time pilots are the ones that get the expensive drones and the Skydios compared to DJI. And this is part of the difficulties with the continued advancement in technology, is that we've got to keep on top of this, and everyone's getting slightly different training for the different equipment, because they work differently. So if we look at Mavic Enterprise, the camera quality and the time it flies and the way it flies is different. The way it captures images is different. So we approach our flight patterns differently to an Air 2S, as an example, that doesn't have a mechanical shutter. So it's horses for courses, but where possible, we are absolutely all aligned. So if I look at Australia, we've got 2 REOCs in place. They're absolutely aligned to each other. There might be some slight discrepancies depending on the use cases, but the majority of it is aligned. So we have uniformity. One of the things I do want to note with FlyFreely, and because of its subscription model, it's easy to do micro experimentation. So if you want to have a look at how it works, it's easy to put on one pilot at the start or have small numbers compared to just going wholeheartedly into one area. And that's also how we've run our drone program. We've done micro experimentations of making a little bit of an application into one area. Thermal's one that we're now starting to look at and play in, and understanding about how we can add value to both programmed but also to our clients.
Fantastic. Awesome, mate. No, thanks for that. That's really clear. Awesome. So jumping from the next one to the biggest focus in the next 12 months, obviously. We don't want to talk about any IP or anything like that, but I guess for yourself and maybe the focus you guys are sort of looking at, but maybe even just in the next general vicinity of the next 12 months, where are you guys looking next, and probably where are you avoiding too? I think is probably more importantly to note.
Yeah, so if I just want to quickly run over some of the stats, so just demonstrate where we're going to next. So right now, on one client, we've flown 1,100 sites using Skydio, and these are all Skydio stats because we don't have so much visibility on the DJI stats. Within that, there's 3,364 flights over the last year and a half, roughly. We're averaging 9 flights per day between our Skydio operators. That's 4 of the pilots that operate Skydios regularly, and that's 690 hours. Of flight times. So if I look at where we're hoping to take the program next, is to increase those stats significantly. We're the heaviest user of 3D mapping with Skydio globally, just because of the content and amount of flight time that we do. But it's about scaling up sustainably is our next goal. How do we bring it as an everyday tool within our business? If I look at the property services business that we're discussing about there, they essentially do our painting and our grounds work. How do we make this tape measure? Instead of a laser measure that they do to do the estimation, how do we make this the tape measure, which is what we're working on in that space? And it's not necessarily sensitive IP because nobody can access it, but that's where we're looking about the everyday use. So everything was new at some point. But now we're really ramping up to make this the same as your tape measure or your hammer, anything else that we have in the FM space. What we are avoiding is letting everyone go and do everything at once. So we're focusing on very specific use cases, and then how we can add value and getting that workflow correct, and button down appropriately before we go and take the next challenge. So we do our 3D mapping very well. I mean, 3,364 flights is a lot of flights between 4 pilots. They do that exceptionally well. We're very comfortable with that part of it. We do our roof mapping very well as well. We're very comfortable doing that. That we've got a pilot that just does that for one of our contracts here in New Zealand. If we look at the next stage is how do we get our estimation right? So that's what we're focused on now before we expand to the other areas. And there's some additional R&D. So we took about building washing. Certainly that's something that we're looking at within the business. How do we make efficiencies there? There's plenty of opportunities on the market. They don't necessarily meet our requirements. So we are certainly looking at how we can enter that space appropriately to meet what we're looking for.
Fantastic. Awesome, mate. Thanks so much for that. I think that's maybe most of the questions there. That was fantastic. Thanks for sharing all that. I was going to say, I'm just looking at the question line. Looks like there's a couple of them already coming through. Do you mind if I just start asking some of these, mate? And we might start with this with the time. Awesome. So the first one has come through and said, thanks for sharing. I take your company part 102. What elements did you request for in FM asset program? Is this really required?
Yeah, look, in the 102 just allows you to have additional scope to what you can fly under your own 102 if you go and get qualified as a pilot. So the Exposition, the that we've requested. We've got BV loss nighttime, or BV loss is going to be a challenge. And Alex noted before about working interchangeably between Australia. We're going to be leveraging off of Australia in the future for their BV loss examples, because some things are easier to achieve in each country. So we'll leverage off of the experience there to then apply for our BV loss here in New Zealand. So we've got extended EV loss, nighttime works, and then we're also doing chemical spraying, which will probably identify that we are going down that spraying route pretty heavily in the future. But New Zealand's a little bit more complex than Australia, so you do need an exposition if you're going to drop any chemical article from a drone. Particularly chemicals, they're considered agricultural chemical license that you need, which is the same as a helicopter pilot or a fixed wing pilot. So it is a little bit restricted to get in that space, which is why the 102 or the Exposition with CAA in New Zealand is fundamental to make sure that you can continue to grow. There is a significant delay. I think it's 18 months at the moment. Our Exposition's been in for 2 years. We should be getting that really soon. Actually, it's being assessed, or has been assessed, and we're just tidying up a few bits. But for growth, to be credible in the industry, it's important to have this, because there's a lot of cowboys out there. I'm not saying that anyone on here is a cowboy, but we're certainly seeing in our industry people flying outside of what's actually allowed when they don't have the licensing, and that will catch up at some point. Australia has licensing for their pilots, and there is some noise in New Zealand to establish a licensing program within here as well.
Awesome. I was going to say, I think that answered 2 questions. There's another one here saying, how long did it take to process your 102 Exposition? So brilliant. Tick 2 off. Great. So they've got one here saying Skydio versus DJI. How's Skydio? How do you find the Skydio product? Are you running X2s? If so, how do you take this sacrificing quality of images and lack of load capability?
Yeah, so we're absolutely running S2s. We have lots of them. We are looking at the new one, the X10.
Mhm.
The S2s, look, there's absolutely some disadvantages in the quality of the image, but how close it can be to a structure and how quick it can fly around to build a 3D model is where the advantages are. So we do sacrifice some of the image quality, but on the other side, we pick up the model reconstructs. I noted Drone Deploy before, because that's who we use for our reconstruction, our photogrammetry software. And the early stages of doing 3D models with the Skydio to where they are now for the reconstruct, the quality has improved significantly. The images are okay. Like as you noted, they're not necessarily as good as the DJI product, because they were built for cinematography initially. But the Skydio, my understanding is the next one is very, very good. Until we run the lifespan of these ones out, the S2s, we won't progress to the X10, but it's certainly on the plan.
Awesome, mate. Fantastic. That's a great answer. Great. So the next one I've got here, Jay, what are you guys doing in the AI, ML, computer vision, and the recognition of defects or observations?
Yeah, so AI at the moment is we're training it to estimate for us. There are estimations in place in other elements, like a roof estimation that's readily available right now. We're looking at complex estimation. In terms of defect observation, we haven't gone down that path yet. Right now, we do that manually. We do have somebody that analyzes all the sites that we go through, particularly on our flight that we've flown 1,100 client sites. We've got an asset management team, so they go through each of the models that get reconstructed for us, and they'll identify all the defects. Moving forward, that's absolutely something that we want to do. There are other products. Unleash Live is more focused about transmission and power lines, but they have some very good AI models built in there. Drone Deploy are also building AI models into their system, so we can now, from some of their models, I know more that's coming through, is we can send it text prompts, identify all the cracks within the buildings. I'm not saying that is something it can do right now, but that is something that they're working towards.
Fantastic. Great, mate. That's awesome. That actually fits well into the next one. From Romana, we've got what do you do internal warehouse inspections?
So we have a few different tools for this. We can fly with the Skydio on a large enough site, and we have done that in the building I'm sitting in now has a very large warehouse outside, and we've practiced with that. We don't traditionally fly inside; it's not necessary. We do use other products, so I'm sure everyone on this call is aware of Matterport. We use that pretty heavily. It's a good tool. It's very specific for what it does. Drone Deploy has its walkthrough product as well.
Mhm.
And there's some other products. There's a BMO product that we've looked at and are still looking at. So it depends on the use case. So we don't use a Matterport for all our sites. Sometimes we do absolutely use a Skydio, depending how large the site is. And we might use a walkthrough for other sites and doing auditing. So it just depends. It's horses for courses.
Absolutely. Absolutely, mate. Great. And then one here as well. Can you please talk a bit more about washing, which you mentioned earlier? We might actually, if that person who put that, it says anonymous, but if you have any maybe more specific questions on that. But Jay, do you have any, are you able to unpack that a little bit more about what the washing side of drones is?
Yeah, so building wash, well, I'm sure, but I'll quickly explain. Traditionally, we use people on an EWP with a pressure washer. We'll either apply a chemical, a bleach, or a soap, or even complete a roof treatment with pressure washing units and have people in worker heights, harnesses, and lines. If we're looking at with a drone, it's essentially the exact same thing. We've just taken the people element out of it, and we've taken the EWP component out of it. We still run a hose as a pressure washing end at the end of the drone. We currently don't do this as a business personally. There are businesses out there. As I noted, there is one in New Zealand getting a lot of airtime, Australia getting a lot of airtime at the moment. And there's certainly in America, there's a lot of different companies pushing these things. It's important to note that if you look at importing one of these drones, it still needs to align to the CASA or the CA requirements to be able to fly. It needs to be approved for that. But it's allowing us to be more efficient. We're going to be going down the path. I made that clear before about our exposition that we've applied for. And we are specifically looking at doing something ourselves. And that's purely because we're not necessarily happy with what's on the market. It's all very leading front edge adapted equipment or specific equipment that doesn't have the safety elements that we're looking for. Obstacle avoidance is one of them for us. We will not fly a drone without having appropriate obstacle avoidance.
Sure. Well, that's great. And I was going to say, this might lead to the previous question as well, but have you had a look into LiDAR scanning for buildings? You may have touched on that before as well.
So we have had a look at LiDAR. We find that the photogrammetry is more than appropriate and accurate enough for what we're doing. So if you look at, there's products for BIM as an example, but BIM's really good for a very large project that has a high budget and new builds. 90% of the space we work in FM is already built. So reverse engineering that is very difficult, costly, and time consuming. So the photogrammetry we find is more than enough. LiDAR, we have toyed around with using it. We don't necessarily see the benefits because it's a point cloud database unless we're going to bring it into a BIM model or a CAD model, which we don't do. It's not where we sit. We sometimes do build floor plans and site plans off the photogrammetry. But again, we're very comfortable with the accuracy that we're getting out of our captures, not to require the additional costs of LiDAR. It's not to say it's out of the question, but right now it's not a viable use case for us.
Yeah, I was going to say that definitely the photogrammetry probably ticks most boxes for you guys, as opposed to diving into LiDAR. Great. The one here as well from Ben, how much more efficiency are you seeing using drones for inspection versus traditional methods?
Yeah, look, the efficiency quantification is difficult to make because benefits that we're seeing aren't necessarily traditional. So an example of this is we've had a contractor would normally go to site to measure the width of a driveway or the post on a farm here in New Zealand to identify if a crane can fit through there. They now just jump on, instead of driving an hour to site and an hour back after visiting, they now just jump onto our models and measure. And because we give access to all these models to our clients as well as our contractors, we're not necessarily understanding what the efficiencies are. We're just getting them naturally in the background. That they may, instead of having that downtime to go drive the site, they move to that project and move straight to another one for us, as an example. But we're not measuring that. We don't see it. In terms of the towers that we're capturing for that client that's got 1,100 sites, they'd usually send a team of 2. They'd get through maybe 3 sites in a day. Our pilots can get through 5 to 8 sites, depending on how close they are together, capture it. The resource there for the riggers to go up these towers is expensive, as you can probably imagine. They climb and come back down. Now we do these scans, we send it to them, they make the assessments from their desktop, and then identify whether they feel like they need to go to site or not. So we're reducing all that travel time, all that expenses that are incurred as a result.
having that model there moving forward. I was going to say there's probably a lot of things your clients are getting out of it that might not be able to see it on your side of things, but I'm sure they're probably using it, measuring it for things would be fantastic.
Yeah, look, in the FM space, the clients are really thankful to have their reconstruct of their buildings, particularly if they're remote sites. With the sites that we're doing are sometimes very, very remote. We fly to little tiny islands on a helicopter because there's no other way to get to these things. We're having conversations with clients in Australia that are just exploring the opportunity and are immediately identifying benefits for sites that are very far away. So if we look at WA, they're up north in the Pilbaras. They never get there. They never understand their sites, but they can then go look at their site on a computer and review something. So if they forget what a room looks like or what's in that room, they now don't need to go up there just to look at a light or understand what they want to change.
Absolutely. I guess if you do that a couple of times over the years, it's probably a pretty handy tool to be able to see the changes that go through as well. Fantastic. Also, we've got about another 10 minutes to go. There's even more questions coming through, which is great. Are you okay to keep going through this, Jay?
Not a problem.
Yeah, awesome. We got one here. So for Auckland and urban sites, even under 102 with the ag elements, is there still possible to spray chemicals, bleach water, etc.?
Look, to spray anything from a drone within Auckland and urban sites, you can do that, but you need to be licensed. It's very clear that you need to be licensed. We've had conversations with the CAA. There's different thought process into it because essentially we're doing the same job as somebody on an EWP with a pressure washer that doesn't need a license to do that piece, and we're dropping the same chemical on a roof space. So we're trying to work that out. Right now, the rules are very clear that you need an ag chem rating with a drone to do any chemical work, whether it's horizontal from a lance, doing pressure washing on a building or doing building wash, or dropping it vertically as a tank and doing a chemical treatment on a roof for moss and mold. Within the urban areas as well, you've got all your flight paths, particularly with the helicopters and the trusts up here. We've got a military base, Air Force, just around the corner. So you've got to make sure they're okay. We traditionally don't have any problem flying within these spaces because the pilots are 102 qualified, and we go and request access from the Airfield Controllers.
Fantastic. Great, mate. All right, the next one. Are there general or specific exclusion zones for using drones, especially for washing?
Look, we're still at the start of this. Exclusion zones, absolutely, there'll be exclusion zones around the operating area directly underneath these units. We will be considering how we manage that appropriately. We do that now anyway. Regardless that we fly, we need to make sure that we're not flying over anybody, and that's very clear. It can be difficult when you're at a very populated site, which is why we choose to either fly early in the morning or late in the evening. And that's part of the reason why in our exposition that I noted, we're flying for nighttime work so we can fly past civil twilight hours. And we can progress in that space. So yeah, absolutely, there are conditions around that. As we progress down that further, we will be looking at it in detail, but there's no different to a normal tool, right? If you have to put a barricade for an EWP, it's the same process with this.
Fantastic, absolutely. And we've got a couple more there. Maybe we've got time for maybe 2 or 3 more. We've got one here of what are you doing for data, photo storage, and cloud sharing?
Yeah, look, our data sovereignty is a key issue for a number of clients. We've got different solutions around that. Fortunately, the photogrammetry that we use, FlyFreely, that's all Australian based. It's landshore there. So we don't really have an issue. Most people in New Zealand are quite comfortable, have all their data stored in Australia. But the relationship between countries is positive. There's concerns with, say, a Matterport that we use, and data sovereignty sits over in the US. So that's when, before we're talking about using the right tool for the right job, sometimes we can't use that tool, even though we'd like to. We have to use a different process. So yeah, there's certainly some considerations. All of it is accessible. We tell our clients that it's their data, it's not our data. If they like the data for the 3D reconstruction, the photogrammetry, they can have that, but they're not going to be able to reconstruct the models. They're going to have to put it back into drone deploy, and they can do that. We're happy to share who we use. And same with Matterport and the other programs that we use. The pilots themselves, they have a hard drive, so they keep the data on their hard drive. So we've got a backup in case something happens, but we're very comfortable that the data we have is secure and safe. We're certainly gone through all our vetting programs in terms of security.
Fantastic. Great, great, awesome. Got two more here. We might call it there. So we've got. Is there an environmental issue with chemicals being used, e.g., window washing?
Look, there's certainly environmental considerations around providing a window wash service. We do that regularly now about managing the products. Products that we use are generally environmentally friendly. It's very rare that we use something that's going to cause any problems with the environment because we don't want to deal with the headaches. An organic wash, for example, or if I was talking to our PPS branch the other day, wet and forget is as a light bleach, essentially, that breaks down very quickly in a dilution. So it's not too much of a concern. The only other benefit we have within program is we actually have a chemist essentially within the team, so they can look at the chemical breakdown for us and guide us about what we want to use.
Awesome. Awesome. That's super handy to have that guy on call. Fantastic. Awesome. And the last one here. So do the Airfield Controllers require 102 certified pilots or company exposition / approval, or both?
Look, some of the controllers, they're comfortable with the Part 102. You'll probably need to send your certification over to them and abide by their requirements. So if you log your flight on the apps in New Zealand, generally come back through an approval. We have flown around some of the larger some of the regional airports directly because of the limited number of flights that they have. We just reach out to them and say, hey, we want to fly in this space, and they give us our time that we can do that. We wanted to qualify, we understand the rules, we've gone to the airfield controller, they've given us permission because there's no flights in that planned area. We also have a radio, an airband radio, so we can keep up to date with what's going on remotely. There's no license in New Zealand at the moment to use that unless you're a qualified pilot. Australia is a little bit different, so we use it to be very cognizant about our awareness of what's around us.
Fantastic. Awesome, mate. That's super helpful. Okay, cool. We might just leave it there. We're almost out of time, but yeah, mate, that was fantastic. I got a lot out of it. Hopefully, everyone who joined appreciate all the questions. That was great. That was a very highly engaged session. So thanks again, mate, for your time. Really, I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate it. And thanks for answering all the questions. And yeah, if anyone else has any questions after this, our details are there. Shoot us a message. We can follow up with Jay if anything critical. But yeah, we'll send out the recording after this as well. So any pieces you want to look into will be out there soon. But sweet, Jay. Anything else you want to say, Jay, before we finish off?
No, look, I hope this has been insightful for everyone on this and worth your time. I really appreciate you spending your time to listen to me. I'm living this every day. So to me, it's just normal. But if there's any questions, like Alex said, fire them through and then we'll come back to you.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks so much, mate. And thanks everyone for coming along, and hope to see you again soon.